We're continuing on Shulchan Aruch Arachaim, Siman Nun Gimel, and we are up to Seif Chaf Bet. Moran writes, Shliach Tzibur b'sachar adif tfemin mi nedava. A hired Shliach Tzibur is better than someone that's doing it free, and this comes really from the Shuvot of Rashba, and the reason being, because this way, more importantly, because this way, people who are not fit for being Shliach Tzibur don't jump to get the bima. They know there's official Shliach Tzibur. You can't just do whatever you want, and hence you don't end up with a person that takes the bima that doesn't really know the halachot and is not fit to be the Shliach Tzibur. But also the Shliach Tzibur who's paid takes the job more seriously. He prepares for it. He makes sure to be on time. He makes sure to deliver properly, and so on. Sometimes some of the voluntary jobs are in such nature that a person gets burnt out after a while. So therefore, if you have a hired chazan, it's more important. The Rama writes, a person should not become the Shliach Tzibur, cannot become the Shliach Tzibur without being okay with the kahal. If someone takes the bima with force, says, I'm going to do it. I have a yortzeit. I have my great-great-grandmother's fifth cousin, 7 times removed, died on this day 150 years ago, and therefore I have to get the bima. He goes up there, listen to this, the hidush of the Rama. Ein onin amen achar birchotav. You don't even answer amen after the brachot that he says. You can't. A person cannot become the Shliach Tzibur without the tzibur wanting him. Now you can't. It's not by force. So therefore, it's good to have a hired chazan. Says the Mishna Berurah, that's something very interesting. He says the reason in Seif Katan Samach Gimel that we mentioned from the Rashba, she'eno hagun rashai lipshot raglo litpalel. This way, people who are not fit for Shliach Tzibur cannot take the bima. Ve'im haya bin dava, if it's bin dava, then everyone could go up there and become Shliach Tzibur, and then you end up with people who are not fit. But then he says, Shliach Tzibur is going to be more careful also because he's getting paid and so on and so forth. And therefore, even though that this is something that the ashirim, the rich ones, pay for, this is, even though that you could find Shliach Tzibur bechinam, v'afshish bechinam, tzrichin ha'aniyim gam ken liten schirut ha'shliach tzibur, sheshaliach tzibur b'sachar adif, because it's fit to have a chazan that's paid. Even the aniyim, even the ones who don't have money as much as the rich ones, they should participate in paying for the hazan. Is a function, is a proper function of the tzibur to have a higher chazan. Says the Mishna Berurah, below ratzon, this they can't go up without the permission and the will of the tzibur. En la'adam leitkotet ba'avur shum mitzvah. Mishna Berurah says a person should never ever fight for a mitzvah. You get into fights because of it. You get into machloket, chas v'shalom, because of it. Kigon gilat sefer Torah, chayotze b'hen. Who's gonna get hagbaha, gilila? It's my turn, and so on. It's one of the reasons, by the way, that the Sfaradim, they have the minhag of selling the mitzvot. This way, aside from the fact that it supports the shul to some extent, it is clear. You bought it, you get it, and that's it. It's sometimes more complicated when you don't have selling, and it has to be in order of names and so on. Then you need a real competent gabbai and a proper system. But nevertheless, with all those given, still sometimes you'll have people who expect, and the expectations not met causes frustration and anger. Sometimes he gets into machloket. So the Gemara says, the Mishnah says in Kiddushin Daf Nun Gimal, "Tznuim moshkin et yedehem milechem hapanim." When they divided lechem hapanim between the Kohanim, the tzanua people who were modest, they would just not eat even. because it's a little lechem, all the Kohanim are there. So they'll say, like, it's not kedai to fight. And the people who, Gemara says, the ones who were gargranim, the gluttoners, so to speak, they would grab and jump and climb on top of each other's heads and so on. That's not necessarily, even though that you're showing the chidush is over there, even though that's mitzvah, it's lechem hapanim, it's kadosh, still the snuim moshchinat yedehim, and that's a conduct that the person has. You have better and bigger priorities, and the greatest priority is shalom and a certain sense of being higher than this, to get into machloket, because we had a alav shalom, Rav Schlanger in Baltimore. He was a tremendous person. He was a survivor of the camps. You saw a glow on his face, like literally a glow on his face, his tremendous personality of Torah. He would never eat in the dining room of the yeshiva for two reasons, he said. Let me tell you one thing about him. When they had the death march, him and his younger brother were on the march together. And this is like skeletons. And people who didn't eat. You've seen the pictures of people looked like literally like a skeleton. And they're walking, and his brother couldn't walk no longer. And he fell, basically. If you fell in the death march, you would be shot right away. So he couldn't see his brother die. He himself was on the verge of collapse too. But he picked up his brother, he put his brother on his shoulder and started walking. Now imagine the skeleton having another person on his shoulder, walking for miles, nonstop. And the thing is, you didn't know even if they're going to stop anywhere. And he got like everlasting damage to his bone structure and back. So he couldn't sit on a normal chair. He opened the yeshiva, the Schlanger's yeshiva in Baltimore now, so the highest level of learning and so on. And the first dinner that they had, he said the stories of his stay in the camps and the death march, all that. And he said, this yeshiva is my nekama. He says, this yeshiva is my revenge. When they wanted to destroy, and you have the young people now flourishing in Torah, tremendous levels. You see, Torah is living within Am Yisrael. It's a tremendous thing. So he would not walk into the dining room of the yeshiva. When he was before he opened his own yeshiva, he was a Rebbe in Israel. And it's for two reasons. A, he couldn't see food wasted, and there's tremendous food that gets wasted in commercial level of any organization that they have. In that way, there are extras. You can't keep the extras all the way, always, all of them. And for him, like every kazayit could have saved another life, because he saw people, his friends, family, die in front of his eyes from starvation. So that's one. But secondly, he said, you don't stand in line for food. So you don't stand in line for food. You stand in line for things that are important. You have to have priorities. Food is food you eat because you have to, stay alive and healthy, and that's it. It's not something you stand in line for. You couldn't take it, right? So this is, the Gemara in Kiddushin, Daf Nun Gimel, that's basically what it's saying. It says, even lechem hapanim, the Kohanim who were tznuim, who were modest, let's just say, will be what will be, I don't have to get, right? So that the Mishna Berurah uses this Gemara, say, it's not kedai to get into machloket. Even for mitzvot, right? Of who's going to get the hagbah, who's going to get the grillah, and so on and so forth. Getting into machloket is not kedai, right? Sometimes, this Rav was delayed for his trip, and he had to stay in a host city, a different city, for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Or was it for Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur. And got stuck. So he comes to the shul, Minhav Erev Yom Kippur, to see where he's going to sit. So he says, this old man, the entire tefillah is crying. He's crying. crying. Ani afar va'efir, he's talking to Hashem. I'm a nothing. I said, Geschmack. This is the guy I want to sit next to. So uplifting, so amazing, right? Good. He sets his seat next to this guy. Comes Leil Yom Kippurim, Kol Nidre. He's crying, this guy, and this rabbi is, crying with him the whole time. He's saying, "Hatati al khed, afar va'efer." I mean, nothing. Comes tomorrow morning, throughout Shaharit again, the guy's crying. Comes the Kriyat Torah, they give Shlishi to somebody else. And all of a sudden, this old man who has been crying for the whole time, he goes through the roof. He's like, how dare you give Shlishi to him? You know how much more chashuv I am than him? You know who my father was, who I am, who he's yelling at the Hazan, embarrassing the Gabbai. And this Rav is like completely bewildered. He's like, I can't believe what he's seeing. Like, it's complete behelem, shocked. And this whole ordeal finishes, and at the end of Yom Kippur, he asks, I don't get it. Erev Yom Kippur, you're sitting there, Anochi afar va'efer, I'm a nothing, I'm a this, and then all of a sudden, he says, yeah, when I'm speaking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm a nothing, I'm a afar va'efer, but compared to him, who is that? Yitzhara has his ways of getting into a person. And that's, the person has to realize, sometimes we have, nobody hates anybody for chinam. We all have reasons, but the maaseh, compared to the chashivut of shalom, most of the things are chinam. Of course, there are extraordinary things that are there. Sometimes legitimate costs, legitimate things that have to be reconciled between the people. But again, it's not kedai to get into machloket for these things. Okay, it says the Mishna Berurah. But if the mitzvah is going to be mitbatel legamri, that's only if someone is going to do the mitzvah. But if you're not going to do the mitzvah, nobody else is going to do the mitzvah. Then says the Mishna Berurah, inviting guests, supporting Torah. Then you have to stand up for the mitzvah to make sure it gets done. And if you have to speak strongly, speak up in the tzibur, that's something that a person has to do. כאלו, כמבואר בחוש המשפט, בסימן קס"ג, סעיף א' והגה, that certain things are important enough that the kahal has to enforce the concept, the payments of it, and so on, to make sure that it gets done. Okay. Says the Mishna Berurah, this time the Rama says, if someone gets the Amud, he starts being the Shliach Tzibur against the will of the Tzibur, you don't answer Amen. Says the Mishna Berurah, this is not a mevarech, this is a disgracer. It's not a bracha, he's saying. Someone that grabs and says the bracha, niyatz Hashem. So that's something that is important. There was a meshulach that came to Agudat Yisrael of Baltimore, and that's the Rabbi Heinemann's show. And when they were ready to daven Musaf at Shabbat morning, I think it was, and he just went up without asking permission from the Rav of the shul. It was not the Gedolei Poskim, it was not the Poskim of America. He just went up the stairs to the top of the Aron. That's how the Agudah goes up. He went up there to start giving an appeal for himself without asking. So Rabbi Heinemann just told the Hazan to start Musaf. Didn't wait for him, start Musaf. So Musaf said the Kaddish and said Amen, and this guy had to come down, right? So I asked him, I went to him after, I asked him, is this a concept of embarrassing someone publicly? It was a pretty uncomfortable situation. So he says, no, this guy embarrassed himself. You take responsibility for your actions. And if you do something that deserves that type of thing, you're taking people's time without having the permission to do so, it becomes this, right? Even though that here, if you don't answer amen, you'll be pretty embarrassed too. But that's what he's bringing upon himself, is not something that was a surprise. He does not deserve the kavod to be given to him because he's doing something that is disrespectful to the kahal by taking their time and taking the amud, being their shaliach, their agents against their will. It can be someone's agent against them. So says the Shulchan next Seif, the payment, the salary of the chazan comes from kupat hakal, from the kehila's money, basically. Even though that is the same chiyuv for a poor person than a rich person, right? The ani and ashir don't end up paying the same way. So it comes from kupat kahal. This way, everyone has given based on their ability of payment, not the same. In other words, you can't say, okay, we have 100 people in the shul, 100 members. Every member is going to give $100 a month, and that would be the whatever it is, the 10,000, whatever the amount of money is. You can't do that because not everyone is capable the same way. So certain things in Hilchot Tzedakah and the halachot of the community charity, some things are equal for aniyim and ashirim, but generally speaking, it depends on the capability of a person to give tzedakah. Someone that is much more well-to-do, the betin, the kahal used to put on them that this is the amount that they would have to contribute within the tzibur, and other people who are poor, sometimes they would be absolved, sometimes they would have a very minimum contribution, and the subtotal of that is kupat hakal. So the Shalach Tzibur gets from kupat hakal. You don't go to every person and say, well, we're hiring, we have X amount of members, and divide the money, and that's your portion. Because, well, you and him benefit equally from the Shaliach Tzibur. You can't say that. It will be based on the capability of the people, based on their financial status and situation. So says the Mishna Berurah that in Siman Nun Hey, later on, in Shulchan Aruch, we will see that half of it comes from the people, half of it comes from the kupa. In other words, half the payment has nothing to do with how much money you make, but half of it is based on the number of a family. If you have a family that is like middle class, and they have they have the number of kids and people in their household, and you have someone that's rich and there's only one person, so it's not the same. Also, the amount that you benefit will be based on nefashot. Half of it will be based on the number of people who you have in the household and so on. So says the Mishna Berurah, take a look at Eliyahu Rabbah Shemechalek b'Chazan Shani. It says even though that we'll learn in Shulchan Aruch that sometimes it will be half and half, but Shalach Tzibur, the Eliyahu Rabbah says is a little bit different. The Vilna Gaon seems to hold that it's actually a stira. It's a contradiction between this place and later on in Siman Nun Hey, and Shulchan Aruch retracted this psak over here, and over there he paskins differently. But Eliyahu Rabbah, again, as we mentioned, holds that there's a difference between other expenses and the Shaliach Tzibur. Shaliach Tzibur is different than other expenses. It says the Mishna Berurah, we saw in the Ramah, Yesh Omrim shegovin chatzi lefi mamon, chatzi lefi nefashot. That some kehilot, they have a minhag that they do half of the payment from Kupat HaKahal and half of it they charge based on people. In other words, if you're paying him, let's say, $2,000 a month, so that would be, let's say, $1,000 of it would be straight from Kupat HaTzibur, from the money of the Kehillah, which has been collected based on people's financial status. And the other half would be based on people. So therefore, if you have, let's say, 100 people, 100 families in the community, we'll say, okay, fine. So you have 100 people, each one of them will pay $10, and that would be the $1,000. So, well, the other half may be one family within this 100 families gave $1 because they're poor, and the other family gave $300. So that the other half is based on the money and status of the person. Says the Mishna Berurah, in Darkei Moshe, Maran says, the Rama says, "Haminhag midinotenu dal ve'ashir notnin b'shaveh." Says Rama, in Europe, the poor and the rich would give equally. And that's the chetzi that's based on nefashot. The $10 that everyone has to pay equally. The ani gives $10. The ashir doesn't give less than $10. The ashir doesn't give more than $10. Everyone gives the same. And when he's the chazan, by any nisuin, officiating a singing by a chuppah or whatever, so, the chazan's job, like sometimes you would even officiate. So it would get the same thing based on the nedunya. Because it was a very rich man, that the nedunya was hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you get a portion, based on that, his thing would be set up. And Mordechai Yaffe in Sefer Levush writes that we don't have a minhag. When you have no minhag whatsoever, then you always do it based on their financial capability and ability. You don't go based on nefashot, because again, this is something that we don't want to pressure them. Now, for Yamim Noraim is a little bit different, which is a concept that we will discuss in the days to come. We stop here by Seif Chaftalet. We'll continue this in the days to come.